It is April 1st, 2016. This is the Watchman News, and I'm Mike Callahan. This is part 2 to a story that I did earlier. And on that, real quick, let me mention, because apparently someone was upset, and I don't want anybody else to be upset over it, that I was laughing at myself for not being able to pronounce the name of the country, Nicaragua. I normally have no problem, as you can tell, saying that country, but for some reason, I guess maybe it was reading it, or maybe it was I was trying to enunciate it and make sure I got it right. I kept messing it up, and I laughed at myself, not at what the content of the story is about. And I wanted to clarify that because I don't take any of this lightly. A lot of this information seems to have clicked for Mr. Hodges when he had spoke with Kathy Rubio. And I want to say that it's also clicked with a lot of information that I know, whether it be public information that any of us have access to, or some information that I really can't speak about. I gave a little bit of that I could speak about earlier in the first part of this two-part series, and that was about the dredging of the Mississippi River. So if you didn't catch that, I know it's like 28 minutes long, it's kind of lengthy, but you might want to go take a listen. So anyway, continuing on, this is part 2 of Dave Hodges' article. This one's titled, "The Coming Fifth Column Invasion of the U.S. Will Bring Unimaginable death and destruction." In part 1, I detailed information about a planned 7-pronged invasion of the United States with Putin as the mastermind. Part 2 focuses exclusively on the Red Dawn invasion of the United States as one of the 7 prongs. Specifically, this article will center on the fifth column strategies that will precede the invasion of the United States, with paramilitary attacks so horrific that Americans will run to the FEMA camps for safety. This information is indeed grim, but to gain an accurate picture, we must follow the data and let it take us to the truth. Publicly, the United States and Mexico deny that there is an ISIS terrorist operating near El Paso, Texas. However, the rapid deployment of FBI personnel following the release of a Judicial Watch disclosure, which reported that ISIS maintains a base camp only a few miles from El Paso, Texas, is noteworthy. The fact that the gathering of FBI brass at the border and DHS was not invited speaks to the deep division that is forming within the government on this issue. The Judicial Watch report has come under intense criticism from the federal officials since it surfaced in April of 2015. However, the criticism is irrelevant and false. The presence of the ISIS camp is merely part of a bigger paramilitary force preparing to attack selected targets inside of the United States. ISIS is an operating camp just a few miles from El Paso, Texas. According to Judicial Watch sources, that includes a Mexican Army field grade officer and a Mexican federal police inspector. I've heard this too before. During the course of a joint operation test last week, I lost my spot, that's why I did that. Mexican Army and federal law enforcement officials discovered documents in Arabic and Urdu, as well as plans of Fort Bliss. The implications are obvious. Now, real quick, I want to step in there and say that there have been ranchers that have discovered documents, have discovered a plethora of different materials in Arabic, like in places where they've had fences and stuff, to where these people have cut their fences or somehow gotten past their fences, maybe set something down, forgot to pick it back up. There's been a lot of stories about that. According to documents uncovered by Judicial Watch, The Juarez Cartel helps ISIS terrorists move through the desert and across the border between Santa Teresa and Sunland Park, New Mexico. The report goes on to state documents that east of El Paso and Ciudad Juarez, cartel-backed coyotes are also smuggling ISIS terrorists through the unguarded border between Acela and Fort Hancock, Texas. The Judicial Watch specifically state that these particular areas are targeted by ISIS because of their understaffed municipal and county police forces, as well as the already existing relative safe havens the areas provide for the unchecked large-scale drug smuggling. ISIS targets identified. According to Judicial Watch, ISIS is conducting reconnaissance of regional universities, the White Sands Missile Range, government facilities in Alamogordo, New Mexico, Fort Bliss, and the electrical power facilities near Anapra and Chaparral, New Mexico. Sorry if I mispronounced those. The ISIS base camp is part of a much bigger terrorist organization. The Common Sense Show has discovered that there's incontrovertible evidence. I've never heard that word in my life. I swear I haven't. That criminal drug cartels like Los Zetas and the Sinaloas have not yet used MS-13 gangsters as hitmen and child sex traffickers. But so has the Juarez Canal, partners with the ISIS leaders of the base camp near El Paso. Also participating in this terror network are members of the Barrio Azteca gang, and the purpose is to enforce their will upon the border region between Mexico and the United States. Los Zetas has also conducted training in parts of Central and South America and have even allowed MS-13 gangsters to lead in operations when El Comandante Kilo, I think that's how that's pronounced. I'm not sure. Anyway, operated in San Fernando on behalf of Los Zetas. Their training consists of two parts: military training and assassination. In plain corporate language, the Mexican drug cartels are outsourcing paramilitary activities such as assassinations and terrorism, and their new friends, ISIS, has a base camp only a few miles from American soil. And as I covered in the spring of 2014, ISIS is getting its weapons from the Sanchez Paredes drug cartel and receiving training at the base camp outside El Salvador. Farouk Saeed, who is now known correctly as Saeed Rizwan Farouk, has been linked to ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. These names are so hard. According to several reports. Also, we now know that his wife had 19 assault rifles and a radio-controlled explosives designed to take out first responders. Fortunately, they did not go off. It is now being reported that he had a large deposit made into his bank account. Where did the San Bernardino mass murder get his support? Please reread the preceding paragraph. The San Bernardino attack was another in the long line of probing attacks designed to gather information about our response times and strategies of critical incident interventions. Mexican Middle Eastern terrorists are equipped with military-grade weapons. Here is more detail about the likely that the San Bernardino terrorists had access to contain. I think likely weapons is what was meant there. A very disturbing and recent report from the International Assessment and Strategy Center stated that MS-13 is moving away from handguns to the use of AK-47s along with grenades, rocket-propelled grenade launchers, and light anti-tank weapons. The same think tank also reported that MS-13 gang recently acquired multiple shoulder-fired SA-7 anti-aircraft missile launchers obtained from an open arms market in El Salvador from leftover former Civil War stockpiles. MS-13 and now ISIS are equipping its forces with these weapons as they can easily knock out helicopters and airplanes from the skies, and these weapons can be obtained for a mere $15,000. This is chump change for a gang associated with the drug cartels. The same report went on to state that MS-13 has begun to smuggle drugs, weapons, and human beings for the Zetas. MS-13 members are being trained at Zetas camps outside San Salvador, and the training includes high-level military training being conducted by members of Hamas and Hezbollah. Think Tet offensive from the Vietnam War. MS-13 and now ISIS are well armed enough to take over cities by knocking out the headquarters of local police forces in a simultaneous series of attacks in which WMDs are introduced on American soil. This belief is reinforced in the Judicial Watch report. However, if you think this is far-fetched, please keep reading. And I believe he's got a link to the, does he have a link to that report? Maybe not. Maybe not a link to the actual report. Anyway, in late April of 2015, a Texas Ranger wrote me and warned me that ISIS had enough manpower and equipment to launch significant attack in Texas. Here is an excerpt to that communication. And in quotes, "The main reason that I am writing to you is to encourage you to keep writing on the growing threat of infiltration in Texas, and I suspect other states as well. The infiltration that I am writing about is not just special forces that are going to conducting covert drills in our state. That is concerning, and I agree with you this involves martial law. For now, I am talking about ISIS and the danger that they pose to all of us. Our intelligence indicates that they have enough manpower and firepower to subdue a small town." Unquote. I am convinced that on a predetermined signal similar to the Viet Cong Tet Offensive, a coordinated and massive attack will be launched against the United States. What we have been witnessing up to this point are probing actions. ISIS and friends are testing our response times, the nature of our first response, etc. The following are a partial list of ISIS offensive against the people of the United States that Obama and the MSM refuses to recognize the events for what they are: a fifth-column invasion of the United States which will result in martial law followed by World War III. And if you're not aware of this, back in June of 2015, there was a Border Patrol helicopter that was fired upon. The Laredo Morning Times reported that a Border Patrol helicopter was shot at and was struck on Friday evening near La Boda Ranch, according to the Webb County Sheriff Martin Seller. Sheriff Seller said that out of the 5 shots, 2 were confirmed to have hit the helicopter. A spokesperson for the Border Patrol, Sarah Melendez, said the helicopter landed safely and no injuries were reported. It has not been confirmed if the shots were fired on the U.S. or Mexico side. A later Border Patrol statement says the crew of the Office of Air and Marine helicopters was patrolling the U.S.-Mexico border near the banks of the Rio Grande. According to the Border Patrol, bullets hit the right side of the aircraft and the rotor blade, which could have produced catastrophic results, but the pilot was able to land safely with no injuries to Border Patrol personnel. The MSM cover-up instantly sprang into action as CNN reported that the shots came from inside of Mexico. Not so, according to my Border Patrol source. This was ISIS. The Border Patrol knew it, and so did Obama. Now, this story is interesting because you can go back into our archives and you will find in the archives that I had spoke about this. And I said, when the information came out and I had a chance to go over it, I said that it sounded like a directed energy weapon. This gets real interesting. Russian proxy forces armed with Russian EMP technology are responsible for bringing down an F-16 piloted by an Iraqi general flying near the Mexico border. In this beta test of new Russian technology, Russia fired the first shots of World War III. An Iraqi pilot who had the training in the United States for 4 years was flying an F-16 Fighting Falcon aircraft that crashed in the southern Arizona. A spokeswoman for the Iraqi defense minister said last Thursday. Brigadier General Rashid Mohammed Sadiq Hassan was alone in the F-16 Fighting Falcon when it went down during a training mission on Wednesday. The crash occurred near the Mexican border. I have 2 confidential sources, one who is on the inside and another who has connections to those on the inside, and they are both independently saying the same thing. The crash of this F-16 plane was no accident. The circumstantial evidence forms a preponderance of the evidence which supports the fact that Russia is ultimately responsible for the takedown of this particular F-16. ISIS carried out the attack. Going on to page 2 of this article, and I will provide the link to it in the description tab of the video. Scrolled too far. Now, there are some who are falsely or incorrectly stating that the plane was shot down by a handheld Stinger missile which is found in the desert near the crash site of Douglas, Arizona. This claim is rubbish. The F-16 is armed with countermeasures, and it is not likely that a handheld missile Stinger could have shot the plane down given the evasive maneuvers that could have been employed at 10,000 feet, the reported altitude that the plane was flying when it began to fall from the sky. In actuality, what has happened is that those close to the investigation are saying have shaken the U.S. military to the core. This F-16 was not shot down. It was brought down. My sources have stated that General Lloyd Austin, commander of the U.S. Central Command, along with key members of his staff, has stated that they are investigating this crash not as an accident and not as a shoot-down, but as a takedown. A takedown by a localized and focused EMP blast aimed at the airplane. The proliferation of EMP weapons has expanded beyond previously unimagined levels. There are how-to manuals on how to make your own. However, the type of weaponry designed to take down an F-16 flying at about 10,000 feet would have to be amazingly sophisticated and would likely be guided by portable radar with the assistance of lasers. A localized and very crude EMP weapon is demonstrated here in this video, and I will go ahead and play this video for you. Actually going to turn that music down because I have no idea if it's copyrighted music. But you'll get the idea from what he's doing. And if you can't tell what he's doing, he's showing the interference to the electrical communication between between the vehicle, the little remote control vehicle, and the transmitter. Now he's checking the distance from his secondary coil with a meter. And this is a very, very crude device. This is in no way, shape, or form directed. This would be what they call an omnidirectional type of device. One of my old loves was communications electronics. I started studying about that in junior high or so. We also know that Russia exported EMP weapons to North Korea in 2014, and this leads us into a very novel way to look at the recent crash of the F-16 at the Mexican border. After reading the following paragraphs, which exposes the interconnections between Russia, the known terrorist groups, the Mexican drug cartels, and ISIS, it is easy to conclude that Russia is providing localized EMP weapons to more than just North Korea. Russia's terrorist connections connected to the F-16 takedown. We have case of the knee bone being connected to the thigh bone. It has been admitted to in the mainstream media since 2007 that the Mexican drug cartels are openly involved in Middle Eastern terrorist groups. My DEA source has implicated the Peruvian drug cartel, the Sanchez-Paredes cartel, as the arms and drug supplier of the Sinaloa cartel. The Sanchez-Paredes get their arms from Hamas and are also tied into the Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, and Hezbollah, i.e., the CI created ISIS as exposed in detail by ARSOF's Scott Bennett. And it is well known that Russia and Hamas are closely aligned, as Russia has supplied the government of Syria with Russian weapons and used Hamas to deliver the weapons. This is where the shooting down of the F-16s get very interesting. All of these groups are tied to ISIS. And of course, who could forget the 14 American citizens massacred by ISIS in June of 2015 in San Bernardino? More confirming information of an impeding fifth column invasion of the U.S. While being interviewed by talk show host Kathy Rubio, we stumbled upon a topic of common interest. The interview in its entirety is listed below, and he's got a link to last Wednesday night's show there. Kathy speaks fluent Spanish and has many dialects. She is able to move freely in and out of many Central American communities. She also has first-degree biological relatives in Central America. As a background to Kathy's revelations in the interview, I must first mention a source I have had for longer than a decade. This individual was a part of a diplomatic mission in Central America to a country that has aligned themselves with Putin. This person has an intimate knowledge of terrorist training facilities inside of El Salvador in which the Sanchez-Paredes cartel, an example, the Peruvian Army and Nation Bank, has facilitated an intimate partnership between the major Middle Eastern terror groups and the Mexican drug cartels, along with an affiliation with MS-13. The DEA agent, who I have referenced on numerous occasions and whose information has always proven correct, confirmed these associations. In fact, this agent worked in Peru and understands these relationships from a first-hand perspective. In short, the DEA source, the department source, and now Kathy Rubio confirm the exact same information, but the news gets much more serious. The San Salvador bases are expanding into Honduras, where they were observed firsthand by Kathy Rubio, and into Mexico. Conclusion: if we can take solace in anything, the fifth column invasion of the United States in support of a Red Dawn invasion will not take place until the country is locked down in what I believe will be extreme post-election turmoil. For those of you who have read my columns, you already know why all of this is happening. To those who are wondering what is the point, the answer is simple. When one is installing world government and a one-world economic system, an outlier like the United States with its economic might and individual civil liberties cannot be allowed to exist. For the New World Order to come to fruition, America must be destroyed. And in Part 1 and Part 2, I have provided you the overall blueprint. So there it goes. That's the Part 2 of the article. Again, the link will be down in the About tab. And it's very, very sobering information.